Hey everybody, welcome back. It is time for episode 6 of Geek Talk MD. I'm Moses.
I'm Zork. Work.
Oh dear God.
That's not Zork, that's Dave. I'm Pete.
And these are our special guests for today's episode. We've got Pete, as he's just said, and
Andrew.
And the subject for today is Dave?
No, it isn't actually for a change. It's actually going to be about video games, now and then. Or then and then.
The humanoid must not escape. Anybody remember that?
No, we don't. We're not.
That was from an arcade game called Berserk.
Yeah, that was when video games didn't have soundtracks, and you had to make it up as you went along.
No, it actually did that. Never mind. Okay, so.
Was Zork a really old game?
Zork is a very old game. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a text-based, right? I remember it. I know of it. Yeah.
It's not text-based.
It was text-based, Dave.
No, it wasn't.
There was Zork, and there was also the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy one, which most people, it took them hours just to get past the first test.
Well, you know what? There was lots of stuff that happened before any of that stuff. I mean, this was like luxury compared to how things started.
Leave the British accents to Andrew.
1977, 1980. I just quickly Googled it.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Is that?
Well, so this could be this. Actually, there's four of us. This could be the four
games with roots drawn from the original genre game Colossal Cave Adventure. The first Zork was written in 1977
Are they
using
talking
the
about
MDL programming language. That shows you how old it is.
What is
Never
MDL?
heard of that.
Neither have I. What is that, before BASIC or something?
I think it's
But
before
I thought the first game came out of MIT.
Oh dear Lord. Okay.
So did you say the topic was video games?
Video games, computer games, whatever, all that sort of stuff.
All right. Well, if that's the case, I think we have to start off with the obligatory hat tip to one Alan Turing, right?
Okay.
Alan Turing, the father of computer science and artificial intelligence. He's a great guy, He was a British mathematician. For anyone who doesn't know, really look into this guy.
Is this the guy that broke the Enigma code?
It is. It is. He's a great guy. I mean, there's so many things he did. Like, he ran marathons, I believe, and other things. I mean, I guess we're not going to talk about Alan Turing the whole time, but some great documentaries about him, BBC produced ones. You know what I mean? Yeah. But in terms of video games, he didn't actually create any video games, did he? Didn't
he do the first? If he's the guy who dealt with the Enigma, isn't he the guy that created the first, if you want to call it, computer logic that helped crack the code?
Yes, absolutely. No actual video games, but he wrote the, let's say, logic software that would allow a computer to solve chess problems. And now, it was he didn't actually make a game. One of his colleagues then followed up and created something called two-move mate. So it wasn't powerful enough for you to actually sit down and play chess against a computer, but it could allow a computer to figure out if you're in a situation of 2 moves away from a checkmate, the computer would solve that problem. With this program. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's sad that even back then the computers were smarter than.
Actually, Turing's story in and of itself is pretty sad. I mean, the man was a hero of the war, and that because he was gay and because of some of his other political leanings, the British government basically destroyed him.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. Actually, it's convicted of...
Sorry about that, Andrew. I'm sure it wasn't your fault.
Yes, he was there.
Pete was going to go ahead and tell the story. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, he was actually convicted of the crime of committing a homosexual act in Britain in the 50s. And he had the option of either going to prison or being chemically castrated, of which he chose the latter.
Wow.
So, you can imagine, you can't be good in the 50s, that kind of technology, You don't want that to happen today, let alone in the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then apparently he ate an apple that was laced with suicide because his favorite fairy tale was Snow White, was it?
Oh, yeah. The poisoned apple, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's some controversy surrounding that, actually. There was some experiment he was working on that was releasing... what was it? What was that poison?
The
Cyanide?
cyanide?
Cyanide, exactly. That was releasing cyanide gas, and he had normally eaten apples every night. So by leaving the apple out, it may have been inadvertently contaminated. So it may not have been a suicide. There's some debate over that.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah, very interesting.
But what happened with the computer structure after that, though? I mean, with him moving on, did somebody take it on, or how did it eventually get into the games then?
Well, there was a bunch of stuff in between when chess finally broke ground and you got your chess program, and you had stuff like noughts crosses, which is better known to us as tic-tac-toe.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
The layman.
Yeah, actually, if I could just quickly jump in, Dave, I work at as part of one of my jobs, I work at a research hospital, and I can tell you that more often than not, if a scientist who's researching some subject, if he passes on, 9 times out of 10, all of his work basically just gets scrapped. Rarely does it ever get carried on by somebody else.
Really?
It all just goes in the garbage.
Interesting. So I got to hang around your garbages then.
If you want to go through my garbage, be my guest. I doubt you'll find anything worthwhile.
That's interesting. I mean, there's definitely some things that just get set into stone. You know what I mean? Like, let's say Einstein's theory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just,
But
it's not necessarily
but
his
that's
work.
like something that was completed. Like anything that they died while it was still in process. That's it. It's garbage.
That makes a lot of sense.
You would not believe. Like just a few months ago, I saw like 10 years worth of research, films, notes, slides, you name it, just all getting put in a shredder because the lead researcher died, and since he was the one that got the grant, that's where it stopped, and everything just gone. All the researchers working under him were out of a job, and every piece of paper, every scrap of information was shredded.
It's kind of odd. Why wouldn't they keep it?
Yeah, why wouldn't they?
I mean, they invested all that money into the research or whatever.
I think somebody copied something.
Anyway, do continue.
But anyway, so aside from all those hidden treasures that now reside in your garbage.
Yeah, there's certain things that, like, the binary system that just fit. You know what I mean? We just continued using it. So the next iteration of video games would be when graphics came into the picture. So there was this game called Tennis for Two. You ever heard of that one?
Tennis for Two.
Is that like Pong?
Something like that. It's actually closer.
It was like
to
Pong. It was more like ping pong. So you have like a net in the center. Or tennis, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because Pong didn't have the net, did it?
Pong was more like a top view.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This was like a side view.
Oh, okay.
So this was actually developed in the late 50s, and this I don't remember the name of the university, but the interesting part is the platform they ran this game on was an oscilloscope. I know you guys know what it is, but listeners, an oscilloscope...
Wait.
Yes, I know what an oscilloscope is, but...
Come on,
okay,
Dave.
I'm glad you know what it is. No, I have no idea what it is. Moving on.
So if you see any of these old like sci-fi movies, and they have all these little lights and switches and stuff in the background, you'll see like a circular monitor with like a green waveform traveling left to right really quickly.
And usually a
It's like
grid.
a machine that goes ping.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's an oscilloscope. It was basically like a radar platform back then.
Yeah, you usually see one in the opening credits of The $6 Million Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so they basically just took a horizontal line right at the bottom, and you got your little vertical line in the middle of the net, and it's like a dot with a tail on it, but it was so well done in terms of the physics, where this thing would go over the net, right? That it would lose height based on the distance, and because it has this technology in the radar device, and so the two guys playing would have these big square metal controllers where you got a dial and a big red button. You push the button, this dot with a tail on it would fly to the other side, so they go back and forth playing tennis this way, just for a gag.
Well, the funny thing is that it was based on ballistic missile trajectories, so that's what it was used for. And then the code, the actual core of the code, and then this programmer looked at it and said, "Hey, I can make a game," which is what he did.
So
Now,
what Tony
that
Stark
the same
says
thing?
in the first Iron Man movie is actually very true. A lot of the biggest advantage actually came from military technology.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean,
That's a
look
scary
at,
thought.
Look at the internet onto itself.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought MIT was the school that was investigating some of this early code.
It could be they were doing it under contract for the military.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But if
Either of you guys know?
That's generally how it works. Like any of these genius guys that get hooked up always get co-opted by the military. Even if you look at Archimedes.
That's right.
All the things he came up with, he ended up making weapons of war for the Roman Empire, siege engines and such, you know?
Yeah, I guess the only real exception to that would be Leonardo da Vinci, who just couldn't seem to help himself. He just always seemed to be doodling some kind of weapon of mass destruction in the margins.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, okay.
So I mean, that's cool.
If you look at YouTube videos of Tennis for Two, though, from a gaming perspective, one of the weird things is that you can't see your bats. So I don't know how that game plays. So I mean, if you would look at it like if you were going to make a table tennis game, you'd usually see your bat, and you'd see the impact between the ball and your bat.
Right.
But on replay videos, there's no bats, and people use the dial to change the momentum of how they would hit it, so they hit it up or hit it down based on clockwise or counterclockwise. I just thought it was really odd watching it that you don't actually see yourself on the screen on the bats. I guess that was the limitation of what you could do with the oscilloscope.
Right, and they also didn't have a scoring system, so you score yourself.
Pen and paper.
But I mean, inevitably, whoever was programming that particular program, he went on to doing an actual video game company, no?
I'm not sure about that.
Because I thought that there was some evolution onto, creating a video game in one of the actual towers, and I think it was Pong-like, except that the controls were, for some reason, much more complicated, and it never took because of how complicated the controls were. And then somebody else came in and then simplified
Compared
the
to what?
controls.
See some of the controls nowadays. Oh my God.
Yeah, but I mean, it's because our generation is familiar with pressing multiple buttons in sequence and so forth. Whereas here, you remember, here we're talking about, pinball being the most complicated game out there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So I honestly got to wonder if kids today. Here I am. I'm sounding like an old man. Sorry, but if kids today, if you actually put them in front of an actual an old Bally pinball machine, what think of it?
Ding, ding. Well, they have pinball apps.
Yeah, not quite the same. Not quite the same.
It's true.
I'm sure we've had our share of pinball games, although they were more electronic. You know what I mean? You got graphics on there and stuff as opposed to the old ones.
I remember.
They talk back to you.
I remember the first electronic pinball machines that I ever saw were there was a Pac-Man Junior that you moved back and forth between playing an actual pinball game, and then up on the tally board there was also you could play. At some points you'd end up playing the regular kind of Pac-Man game, and it would move back and forth between the two. And then there was also the Doctor Who pinball machine that had a video game aspect to it.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the pinball games, in order to compete, they tried to incorporate some video game aspects because the video games were getting...
Oh, yeah.
I saw a documentary a while ago about Atari itself, and Atari was obviously king of the castle for many, many years, but then they started declining, and then they had two catastrophic failures with E.T. and and there was one other game that really killed them, where they couldn't give the games away at that point.
E.T. didn't like all those unsold E.T. cartridges end up in a landfill?
Well, apparently some guy actually some entrepreneur saw that all these different cassette games aren't selling, and ended up going to all these distributors saying, "Look, I know you paid $5 for this cassette tape, but I'll buy it from you for like $1." And then he collected all of these cassette tapes, went back around to bulk stores and said, "Look, I'll give you this for $2 or $3. You can up it for $4 and sell it out of the bin." And apparently these things were selling like hotcakes, and unfortunately it killed the market because nobody was buying video games at that point. They were just buying these bulk. Why would I buy one video game when for the same money I can buy like 6 or 7, and my kid would love me? The kids didn't.
There was an article last year that showed that the cartridges had been found. They dug them up in the New Mexico desert.
Oh, so they were in a landfill.
Yeah, they were in the desert. It was like a mafia style hit. They buried these fuckers in the desert. I don't see them ever again.
I want them dead. I want that family dead. Oh my god!
It's funny. Even before Atari, you had the Odyssey, which was actually the first home console.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was like in the mid '60s.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Oh my god, that is a long time ago.
That's before we were born, I think.
Before Moses.
Must I remind you yet, for 2 episodes in a row, you're a month older than me.
In body.
Yeah, the Odyssey was pretty basic as a system. Basically, what you got was a couple of cursors on the screen. A first player and a second player cursor, right? So you would put a card in, which would represent the game, and all this card did was modify, like, the physics of what was going on, right? So in one case, you would have a ball that appears, and now it can be batted back and forth. Mm-hmm. So what they did, instead of having graphics, they just had, like, these overlays that you put right over your TV.
Oh,
right?
Wow, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I think I had one of those at one point.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
That explains
So you really are that old. You didn't even know how.
No, I think my dad brought it home, like he one of his coworkers gave it to him. That they'd found it in their garage or something, and yeah,
That's really cool.
And you could play like a sort of a version of Pong,
right?
But it had a button that you could press to make your player smaller or larger.
To make it more difficult.
Yeah.
The paddle, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was something that became a standard feature in the many Pong clone consoles that were out there.
True.
Yeah, and I seem to remember that for a while there we had these things that you stuck to the TV screen, but they were the first to disappear.
Do you still have it?
Oh God, no!
That could be worth like millions and millions of pesos.
Please, that was long gone even before Dad bought me the VIC-20.
The VIC-20, that was like luxury.
Luxury. We used to dream of having a...
There's actually a promotional video on YouTube. It's a 5-minute video. It's basically a sales pitch and an advertisement for the Odyssey. I mean, like, I was born in 75. That's like 1975, not 1875. And the Odyssey came out in 72. So I burst out laughing when I saw people taking the transparencies and it looked like they were sticking them on the TV with like suckers.
Yeah.
So they'd have like different overlays for different ones. So there's like a roulette overlay, like some other overlays.
Well, you got to remember, TVs back then, the actual frame or whatever you call the case of the TV, like for the longest time, was considerably larger than the television. I mean, there were for a long period. There were actually TVs that were practically furniture. There were these massive consoles made of wood. Yeah, made of wood veneer.
Right.
It would be part of a cabinet.
But you know what? Those overlays, they didn't do away with them completely because later on, when Nintendo came on the market, I know that they were trying to get away from the old stigma of the video games, and they brought out that little robot that was supposed to play along with the players to make it feel like it wasn't so much a video game arcade or a system.
Rob the robot.
Rob, was that it? Yes. Rob?
Oh, Rob the robot.
Man, that's bringing back some memories there.
So then they brought that out to make it feel like it was more of a an interactive thing than just video games. But then they used those overlays later on in life when Nintendo and Intellivision came out. They used to use overlays over the number keys in the hand controller so that they would give different assignments to the number keys. So if you press a number, if you're playing a game, 1 would be some function on the game, like shooting missiles or whatever. And on a different game, you'd have a different overlay that you slide into the hand controller, and now the one will do something else.
Actually, I was just remembering remember the movie The Princess Bride?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just watching it again.
Video games in that?
Yes, they did, actually. At the very beginning of the movie, I was just watching it again on DVD the other day, and at the very beginning of the movie, Fred Savage's character, like, he's sick in bed, and he's playing on a ColecoVision.
Yeah, but okay, I'll give it to you.
And I was just like, baseball, oh yeah, right. ColecoVision, I remember that.
That's true, it was baseball, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that.
By the way, Rob the Robot was pretty much useless. One, they only had 2 games that were supported with that robot. That's how poorly it did. And if you play this game, it'll take like maybe 45 seconds for it to essentially push one of the buttons. That's all it did, right? So what you do, because you'd have to put the second player controller in Rob's hand, and he's spinning all these like tops and moving them around and doing all this thing to ultimately push a button, which you could push yourself. What I like to do is use my feet to push the buttons. Way faster. You don't need Rob.
Yeah, it was like
a number of batteries, ridiculous amounts of batteries.
So what you're saying is that you made the robot obsolete.
Yes.
There was a similar situation. I can't remember which gaming system it was, but you could get a pistol attachment, and apparently there was only like one game you could play on it called Duck Hunt.
Yeah, I played that.
Which system was that?
That was
in the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh, the old NES. Yeah.
Pretty much every video game system had a light gun, is what they were called, not a pistol. Is that what you said? A pistol?
Yeah, I called it a pistol. Fine.
It's a light gun.
At least you didn't call it a revolver.
Actually, it's funny enough, the Odyssey had a light gun. Compared to the NES pistol was like, initially it was gray, but then they changed it to like fluorescent orange.
Yeah.
Right?
Thanks to Ralph Nader and his crusade.
But the Odyssey had a shotgun-looking thing, and it looked like a real shotgun. Like, it's uncanny. I mean,
this is actually
and everything.
This is actually sounding familiar.
That's a good point, because this is actually starting to go kind of along the lines of the next evolution, and that is just the violence in video games. I mean, do you think it's the introduction of the guns that really started people worrying about kids playing with these toy guns in these video games, or do you think that could have been what sparked this big concern about violence in video games?
No, I don't think. I wouldn't say that. What about you guys?
It's because the guns were around for so long, and guns were, a stalwart of society at the time. Everyone had a gun. Guns were not a bad thing. Guns protected us in
the U.S.
In the U.S., absolutely, yeah.
Well, I think the big deal there, because I remember just like for about 10 years before there was this big incident. I mean, you could go into any hobby shop and you could buy a model kit of some of, the most well-known types of handguns or rifles or whatever, or even machine guns. They didn't work. They were just replicas, but they looked very real.
Right.
I was constantly begging my dad to let me buy the Walther PPK, but oh well. And then one day, again, Ralph Nader, he was doing his, or was it David Horowitz? Those two guys. He was doing this TV show about being a consumer advocate, and this guy came into the studio and held him at gunpoint and forced him to read his manifesto on the air. And at the end of the manifesto, it said, "And by the way, I've been holding you hostage with a model gun."
Okay. All right.
Right. Oh, thanks for that, Mose. So let's steer it back to video games for a quick sec.
Please, Moses.
Moses. So the Odyssey had a light gun, and we were talking about tennis on the Odyssey, and you mentioned that it was similar to Pong. In fact, when Pong didn't come out until the 70s, a decade later, right? Oh. And it was an arcade machine, a coin-operated arcade machine, right? And so that's what actually created the boost in arcades, right?
And then came stuff like
Atari was the company that created Pong, right?
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
And here's how it all ties together. Magnavox, who created the Odyssey, actually sued Atari, saying they had copied tennis on Odyssey.
Oh,
It was
I
a big
see.
deal, and Magnavox actually they were close to winning the lawsuit, so they did a settlement deal where they got all kinds of royalties, and
Right.
I believe it was $700,000 at the time as an payment.
Ooh, a
That's a lot of
princely
money
sum.
back then.
That's big money.
And it's is kind of a double-edged sword because after that, Magnavox kind of stopped producing games and just became a full-fledged legal body that's just suing people from now on with the rights of Pong. That ended them actually. It was much more profitable to just sue companies rather than to produce games of their own anymore.
Well, they were a full-fledged electronics company. I seem to recall they used to make TVs and.
Yeah,
Yeah, they did.
yeah. They moved away from video games, and then they got bought out later by a firm that's still around today. I forget the name. It's a big one. But Pong, yeah. Did you guys play Pong?
I admit, yes, I've played Pong. I think I played it on the Atari though.
On the Atari.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the cheap knockoff version.
No, the Atari one was the real one, but because the Atari was a console system that you could put a bunch of different games into. You play Asteroids or whatnot.
With the cassettes.
What happened with Pong is you would get these dedicated Pong consoles, so you can't play anything but Pong.
Right.
And it goes to what Moses was talking about, where you adjust the size of the paddles, and it just became a bunch of different features. Where let's say you got 4 paddles on the screen, or different stuff like that involving Pong.
Right.
I have a hard time seeing the appeal of Pong. I mean, I started gaming like 10 years after that came out, so that would have been 82, and Pong came out in 72. But I mean, I've seen in a documentary where the guy who was working on the oscilloscope who designed the Pong game, he said that there was lineups to going all the way outside his lab, like a Beatles lineup for a Beatles concert, just to touch this thing,
Wow.
So through the documentary, I could see the appeal, because I mean, that was like one of the first ever video games, popular video games.
Yeah.
So through the documentary, I could see it, but like as a gamer standpoint, it's something that I play for like 30 seconds or less than 30 seconds. It's hard to see. Yeah.
Well, then you got Sorry.
We have a different perspective, though.
Oh yeah.
What our expectations what we expect to get out of a game is quite a bit different than they were, because for them all of this technology is new.
Yeah.
Right. So it's unseen, unheard of.
Yeah, and by the time we got to junior high and high school, the video arcade was the big thing.
Yeah.
I remember there was one fairly close to the high school you and I went to.
Yeah.
Was it Video Invasion, was it?
Yeah, Video Invasion.
Yeah.
And the thing was again, this is the Atari, ColecoVision. These games were out there and so forth. But again, because of the cost of the console, not everybody had them. And so it was easier for a lot of us just to go to the arcade and spend a couple of bucks and play the latest and greatest video game at the arcade.
Yeah, although I remember one of our classmates one time found and then blew it all in one night at the arcade.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
That was big money.
Video Invasion.
That was big money then.
Oh yeah.
Because it was cheaper then, right? The arcades were much cheaper.
Well, Video Invasion had a good scam because they forced you to convert your cash into
tokens.
Yeah. Oh, you were there too, huh?
I was. Yeah. I remember.
And it's just like gambling with chips, because once it's converted to tokens, you can't really turn them back, and you're not thinking of it like money anymore.
No.
So it's just like gambling chips, in that you spend them and you don't feel attached that it's cash anymore.
And aside from that, the tokens were more expensive than quarters.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And you couldn't change them back to cash, could you?
No.
But I remember the 2 games that I was practically addicted to were Jungle King, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but it was this really low graphics wrestling game.
Wrestling?
Yeah, there was a wrestling.
When the guys go up on the top rope. And,
right. And it was the hardest guy to beat was this sort of African savage. Like incredibly racist African savage type character. And he was even wearing like a leopard skin onesie and like anytime it looked like you were getting close to winning, he'd just headbutt you and knock you across the ring.
Right. Well,
So
I mean,
not a fan of Joust then?
No. What were your games, Pete?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Oh, come on, there must have been, I mean, especially if you went to Video Invasion, there must have been a couple of games that you just made a beeline for as soon as you got your tokens.
I was probably there later than you guys were, so there was newer games there. So, one that I didn't like, let's go that way, it was Karate Champ.
Oh, I remember that!
Probably the worst controls of any fighting game.
That was yeah, I remember that with a full point, half point.
You got two joysticks instead of buttons.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually featured in the movie Bloodsport.
That's right. Although, oddly enough, the version in Bloodsport had slightly better graphics than the one that we had at the arcade.
Maybe because it was in Japan or something.
Yeah.
That could be.
Oh, wow. What about you, Andrew?
But I mean,
I started playing on a friend's VIC-20, and back then a lot of the games were designed around the concept of fractals. So, for example, you might be in a car and you're traveling through a cavern, and the cave system is being randomly generated in real time. So you'd have to kind of move left to right, and it was the kind of game that's so short that you could probably type in from a magazine, which is something that was popular back then. It was something that was doable. We could have magazines and they'd have a few pages of code, and you type it in by hand, and then you get the game to run. Yeah. So that was really my first introduction. But I was really lucky, and I come across as being spoiled about like the 80s, because my uncle was a programmer, so he had a BBC microcomputer. So it's kind of like Atari came out in 84, but at that time I was already playing games like Elite on the BBC Micro, so that had like vector graphics. That was a space trading game, so like buy low, sell high, and the flight dynamics were just amazing. The AI was incredible. Your opponents were based on names of snakes, and they're really brutally difficult to fight.
I actually had a similar start to video games. It was my next door neighbor had Zeus 2001, I think it was called. And this was like an Apple clone. You know what I mean? So it was similar type of games, all that stuff. But, you were mentioning the violence in video games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really don't think it was the guns, because guns were around so long. What really happened, I think, was the political correct movement.
Oh, yeah.
Kicked into place around that time that, what happened was Mortal Kombat came out. That's what happened.
Oh, yeah.
The video
Kombat,
okay?
Yeah.
In short, that's what happened.
Yeah,
so,
first they went after the music industry, and then they came after the video games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was looking at scapegoating. It was just, rather than looking at the sociological problems that a specific country may have, just blame something that's convenient, that can't really defend itself in a sense.
So
that's actually... go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say, you make a good point that, suddenly from, our Pong and Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man type of games, jumping into Mortal Kombat, then the kind of gore, if you want to say, that they depicted in that, you can't argue with the fact that Mortal Kombat was a hugely popular game, in part because people wanted to do those decapitating moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wasn't there a video game called Skate or Die?
Yeah, but it wasn't very... It was just the title that was inflammatory.
Yeah, but I distinctly remember the game... Like, you'd actually hear from time to time from that game, like from out of the speakers, this spooky voice suddenly bellow out, "Skate or die!"
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were a few parents that heard that and went, "What in the world?"
Yeah, that might be a bit unsettling, but, you put that beside... Sub-Zero pulling someone's spinal column out and showing.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's a little different there.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Finish him.
I think Andrew made a good point when he was talking about it being a cultural thing, because in places like, let's say, Germany would be a good example. When Wolfenstein 3D came out, let's not say panned, it was banned immediately because of all the Nazi stuff. And the whole Nazi thing in Germany is incredibly taboo.
Oh no, it's outright illegal.
It's illegal, absolutely. Like you can't even say it's the N-word. Nazi is the N-word in Germany.
Yeah. It's a federal offense to display a swastika.
Absolutely, and that game was just littered with pictures of Hitler and swastikas and Gestapo uniforms and all that.
Did you ever play Doom 2?
Sure.
And there was actually a hidden level where you got
it was Wolfenstein?
Is that what it was? Where you basically you were on this hidden level where you got to kill Nazis?
In Dune 2?
In Doom 2.
I don't know
I'm
about
not
that.
sure. It may have been
I think it was
mod.
Wolfenstein that had the Nazis in them.
Wolfenstein, yeah, definitely did. But it may have been some kind of a mod on Doom 2 you played.
Okay.
It was like zombie Nazis or something like that.
But
anyway,
were there any other games that were outright banned?
Oh yeah, there was a bunch. I mean, again, it goes to the the region. Like recently games like Call of Duty, where
Really?
they go into parts of Iraq and stuff. So obviously the games are banned in Iraq because you're trying to make them look bad and stuff, and it's almost like a sign of aggression to make video games.
Forgive my ignorance, but some of these more recent. Oh, shut up! some of the more recent games I'm not that familiar with, but if I remember correctly, when the first version of Call of Duty came out, wasn't it a World War II based?
Or
was that a different
one or something? Yeah, it was one of them. Yeah,
and they actually went to a lot of effort to make it very historically accurate.
Well, I don't know about all that. It was still a game. They tried, but it was more centered on shooting things than history, really.
Yeah.
But one good example, like you have the cultural stuff where things are banned for really specific reasons, but then you have something like Manhunt, which was just banned across the board in almost all of Europe, like the UK, France, Italy, you know what I mean? You name it. Because Manhunt was essentially just, first of all, your character was a lifer in prison. And the guy who gets you out is this insane movie director who's forcing you to kill people for him, and he records it. There's cameras everywhere. So the
you're
game
basically
is
making a snuff film.
Yeah, exactly. The entire game is one big snuff film where all you do is kill people in interesting and unusual ways, in very graphic ways. So, for me as a kid, like, I wasn't that young when I was playing it, but I really enjoyed that game, and not, the glorification of violence or anything, but it was actually a very good game in the stealth genre. There was a lot of things that pioneered, like, you would throw an item and the enemy would hear it and start moving in that direction, and you would sneak out, and there's a lot of cool things about the game. And in the United States, they were the most lenient towards it, and by the time Part 2 came out, they just censored the execution scenes. You know what I mean? When that came up, it would just get blurry and stuff. But the game itself was intact, and so it was very playable. It's a fun game.
Was there any games that were actually banned in North America that anyone can recall?
I mean, what about the Grand Theft Autos? I mean, I don't know if they were originally as graphic originally, but I know that recently, there's been a lot of controversy about, what you're allowed to do against cops, for example, which I heard there was a lot of, kickback on. And just, things with the prostitutes and whatnot. I mean, I know that the whole purpose of making a new version of the game is to step it up, but do you think that, things like Grand Theft Auto was as controversial?
It was. I mean, in places like Germany, for the things you mentioned, prostitution and violence, but not in here or the U.S. We don't mind that stuff here. We like that stuff.
I think one of the difficult things is that because the graphics processing capabilities are increasing, I mean, you have CryEngine delivering photorealistic effects. So I think the line between reality and computer games is definitely blurring.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see photorealistic faces and stuff like that, they're kind of mind-blowing to see it. I mean, there's a documentary called The Fog of War by Robert McNamara, and he points out that in World War I, it was that the U.S. soldiers weren't hitting their targets, and they wanted to figure out why back then. And it turned out that they simply weren't firing their rifles because they didn't want to. So, I mean, that's a problem that they've been working on like how to get people to fire their rifles. It sounds kind of funny and strange, but that's how we sort of ended up with modern simulators. Like the US military is really into using modern simulators and it has a desensitizing effect, that on the person. So
100%. Yeah. And even, have you ever seen the footage of like U.S. military soldiers piloting drones with like a Xbox 360 controller?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible how much it is like a video game.
Yeah. It's funny because we're talking about Mortal Kombat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how much offense. Actually, real quick, soon after Mortal Kombat came out, they released the ESRB rating system. That's how much of an impact it made that we had to start rating these games. You know
What does it stand for?
Rated M from ESRB?
Yeah.
Entertainment Software Ratings Board.
So it's like the MPAA for movies.
Exactly.
Okay, right.
You know, they had to bring that out specifically when Mortal Kombat, I think Night Trap, that was a game that involved a little bit of nudity. And so, we don't want kids to see this or whatever, so they created this rating system. That's where you'll see a game where it says rated M for mature, stuff like that.
Right.
So was this before or after Leisure Suit Larry came out?
That's what I was about to say.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think we started gaming, there wasn't any ratings. And so our ratings came from whether our parents would be okay with that. I mean, it's sort of parent-guided, like the old 80s style parent-guided.
It was 1990.
How effective were those ratings?
Okay, one at a time, guys, one at a time. Sorry, Andrew?
My question is, like...
Andrew, go ahead.
The thing with movie ratings is that they started off being fairly strict, like in the 80s. Like, sex scenes in movies weren't something that was seen. I mean, I remember when Terminator 1 came out, like, there's the sex scene between the two characters, and that was seen as something that was gay. At least it was to me that back then. Usually cameras would cut away from sex scenes.
Oh, no, because around the same time, there was another movie that came out called To Live and Die in L.A., and believe me, it was ridiculously sexually graphic.
Yeah.
By comparison.
So the trend in the 80s was to cut away from those scenes, but over time, those ratings were chipped away. So I was wondering if the same thing that happened to movies happened to games, because I was too old to be affected by the ratings. My mom, she doesn't know how to program a VCR, so she really didn't take too much interest, which is great.
Okay. Show of hands. Figuratively speaking, show of hands. How many of you guys have gotten phone calls from your parents at one point saying the VCR is flashing 12 again?
No, I never got that call because my mom simply didn't care.
Not phone calls, but I mean, when it did happen, I was always the one who programmed the VCR in the 80s. So yeah, it got kind of tiresome.
Yeah, but I mean, even with regards to the video games, I mean, you guys it may have been different when you guys were getting parents to purchase video games for you or whatnot. But for myself, it really just depended on what was on the box. And if the box wasn't overly graphic, usually she wouldn't question it. So, I didn't find there was really any parental supervision, because as soon as I started talking anything to do with computers or video games, immediately her eyes would gloss over and she wouldn't care less. And I could be playing, Mortal Kombat for all, and she would never be none the wiser. I mean, to say that, parents were really, controlling what we were playing, I don't think that they really were, until the boxes started getting graphic.
Yeah. Well, I think my mom was more worried about the impact that it was having on me. Like, I'm staring at the screen too much, I'll get square eyes, that kind of concept.
Well, it's just the time for sure.
I recall there was one weekend that Dave and I sat in his room in front of his Amiga and played a video game. I think it was for practically 2 days straight. We even played through an earthquake.
Yeah, Day of the Viper, like that.
What game were you playing?
Day of the Viper, I think it was called. It was a tank in a maze.
It's sort of a first-person shooter game.
Yeah. But anyway.
So I think what really happened was the ethics of our society eroded more than, the game rating system.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of like when bombing first came to play, right? Aerial bombardment. Right. That was seen as a crime against humanity, as much as nuclear weapons are today, And it just came to be that they just started doing it and said, well, it's one compromise and another compromise. And then you look at the outrage about Mortal Kombat, right, in 1992. Fast forward to Mortal Kombat today. It's insanely graphic. I mean, back then it's like, oh, look, you chop someone's head off, there's blood everywhere. That's not good for kids to see. Now, if you see some of these execution moves, like there's one in particular where you'll like cut the guy's jaw off, and then they'll pose right beside him and hold up an iPhone, and it takes a little selfie, and then it posts it to Facebook. So you want to talk about the glorification of, and there's nobody complaining about that these days, you know. So it's our society that's changed, and really we have become a more violent society. You know, I mean, like it or not, maybe not physically, but we're more accepting of violence, which is odd to me when you look at the stigma around something like nudity and sexuality. You know, you're allowed to see, even as a kid, graphic violence. You know, that you were talking about your exposure to video games and how your parents reacted. I mean, I watched Hector chop Angel Martinez's head in half with a chainsaw in Scarface when I was under 10 years old. You know what I mean? Nobody batted an eyelash. That's true. You know?
Yeah, that's true. But do you think that
But you did get to see Michelle Pfeiffer nude though in the same movie.
Absolutely.
So pluses and minuses. But I mean, do you think that the outrage is because of, like, exclusively because of our society getting used to it, or do you think it's our inherent, 4-year memory span to the last horrific event that was tied to a video game? Because inevitably, we're going to have another Columbine moment, or eventually we're going to have another, somebody was playing some video game for 12 hours, went out and started running amok with his automatic rifle or machine gun in a school, and then to tie that to the video game, and suddenly there's going to be outrage about video games again.
Yeah, but I mean, you can always look back to way before that. The kids would jump off their 3-story house because they saw Wile E. Coyote do it and survive. And the parents saying, "Oh, that we should ban all these cartoons." And it's not that the kid was watching all these horrible cartoons, so to speak. No, it was because the parents weren't teaching their kids properly.
Well, here's the thing, Moses. Have you ever seen Listen, I'm going to call you Moses. When's the last time you've seen like a Looney Tunes cartoon on television? They're not on television.
No, I haven't seen it in ages. No,
it's all like deemed violent, and you won't see Tom and Jerry. None of that. It's all gone.
Yeah, no. Actually, I tried showing my kids
TV. It is, but I mean, remember that we're moving away from that TV environment and moving into everything is available.
Yeah, recently I tried showing my kids Pepe Le Pew, and I got halfway through one cartoon and said, "Oh my God, I'm showing them a rapist."
Yeah, it's so weird. You know what I mean? And the thing is, it was gone for a long time. So you're going to have a whole generation of kids from this. It's the political correct generation. I don't know what you call them.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, that being said, this generation is not unfamiliar with South Park or Family Guy, true. Even the Simpson evolution. I mean, all of these things have been well within all of our time periods, and we can all see how much more they have to push the envelope, and if we're letting kids watch this stuff too, it's stuff that may not necessarily be appropriate anymore.
Okay, let's talk a bit about where you see video games going, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's good. Where they're going, I mean, we're going into VR. That's the only next logical step, and we've been talking about it since the 80s and 90s, and
True.
I'm sure you guys went down to the X when they had that VR game.
I heard about it. Never actually got a chance to check it out.
Yeah, so incredibly primitive, but these days there's so much cool stuff, and it's still maybe at the embryo stage, but there's this cool thing where it's almost like a gyro harness that it goes around your waist, and you have like a treadmill underneath you.
Yeah.
And so with that in tune with the VR goggles, you can actually run around, but you're staying in the spot because the treadmill just moves, right? In any direction. So you're getting into like the infancy of a holodeck almost,
Well, actually, even if you took a step back before taking that step forward. Definitely the world of MMOs, online social gaming systems are integral to a lot of play today, where you create your character and that character is part of a global community with people from all over the world, and together you do adventures and missions and join clans and whatever the game genre is, you guys do it together. And then when you tack that into the new VR world, suddenly we may still be in the basement, but mentally we are now part of this international gaming community, walking and talking and so forth.
Andrew, anything to add?
No. Carry on.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's a social thing, really. I mean, I remember it was bad enough when I'd be sitting there with my friend on the couch and we're playing games. But there are so many games these days, that's not an option anymore. You can't actually sit beside someone and play a game with them, unless you're talking about sports games or certain games.
Yeah,
but
sure.
the majority of them, that's not even an option. You have to be, you'll get together with your friend after school and you say, okay, run home and we'll jump online and play,
Yeah.
It's still social in the sense that you're talking to someone, you're interacting, but it's not in the same way. It's somehow even further removed from just sitting there together staring at a screen, as opposed to being outside playing.
Well, to that point then, let me ask the question. Do you think that if a person is in their basement playing a game online, and let's say it's the latest and greatest, so it's full interactive, full voice, real-time gameplay, and they're in a group or in a clan or whatever, and they're doing missions together, do you think that that's the equivalent of social? Do you think that that's the same as sitting down beside a group of people playing a video game?
I would say no.
Yeah, it's different. Here's the thing: are you playing with your friends that you know in life, or is it your online friends from around the world? And that there's a big difference there, because when you have your real life buddy and you guys get together and say, all right, let's play online a little bit, you're interacting with someone who's your real friend, and then you're gonna go out and play football or whatever the next day, and and so it is social. It is interacting when it's your internet friends. It's a little different though. It's a little bit different. Like, let's say you don't have any real life friends and all your friends are these e-friends, right?
Yeah.
How do you borrow a cup of sugar? What happens when you're in trouble and you need some help?
Anybody do that anymore?
A cup of sugar? No, they don't.
But to your point.
Okay, actually, I think we're going to have to kind of move things along here, unfortunately. I really would love to carry on talking, because I think we've still got a lot of places to go with this conversation.
Yeah, there's still a lot of meat to go into. But
so perhaps maybe a few weeks down the road, maybe we can do part 2 if you guys